If I may, I would love to review my favorite book that I just finished, Charlotte's Web by E.B. White. Everyone that is under the age of 20, under the age of 40, under the age of 50, even under the age of 80, has read or watched Charlotte's Web, because I think it was a book we all read and a movie we all watched in primary school and elementary, right? I wonder if it's like a global read book. But this book is my favorite. One, because it's a children's book, and I love children's books because you have to get worldly concepts and make them so simple that a child can devour them and consume them and learn from them. So it's not like a psychological self-help book, because those are so like uncreative and more logical based. I try to read like self-help books, but I learn more from children's books than I do from like a psychological self-help book, because it's so, there's only so many words in the dictionary that you can put next to each other to make emotions. And when you read a logical book, it doesn't really use emotional words. And in a kid's book, you have to use emotional words because that's what kids understand. Let me find a passage and let's read it to state my point. Oh, look how cute. Can't we all relate? I know I relate to being the runt of the litter, being the mutt of the pack, being the dork diary, being the wimpy kid. It's so interesting to think about what books I pick because I relate to them. What books do you pick because you intuitively or emotionally feel like the things that you're grabbing? Say you feel bad about yourself, you grab bad foods for yourself. If you feel happy and inspired, you only want to grab inspiring food or good foods. I have been on the unhealthier side, but hey, I could still play with makeup, right? But Wilbur's story, I wonder if he's a Cancer, because Cancer has to do with being neglected. He was born into is it like 6 piglets? And he was the runt, the smaller one, the one that you kill so they don't have to die by themselves. And he was saved by Fern, because Fern connected with him, and Fern was empathic and she could talk to animals, which is pretty cool. I wonder, and there's a passage in here, I wonder if we could all talk to animals, but just kids aren't afraid to, so they could listen to them. That was a passage that Mr. Zuckerman or Mr. Arbol was talking to. It was wife and husband talk. But anyways, Wilbur was the runt of the pack, which I think is a concept that we all relate to and we all understand. So that was the basis of Wilbur's story. Okay, let's read a passage. Next morning, Wilbur arose and stood beneath the web. He breathed the morning air into his lungs. Drops of dew catching the sun made the web stand out clearly. When Lurvy arrived at breakfast, there was the handsome pig, and over him, woven nearly in block letters, was the word terrific. Another miracle. That is Wilbur and his friend Charlotte. And Charlotte has made it her life purpose to help her friend. I love how we get to see Wilbur as the ingenue and Charlotte as a more elderly, philosophical spider, because she is really small and she watches the world from that perspective. So she watched all the pigs come and go, die to get cooked into ham and bacon. She watched She just sees the world from a smaller perspective, which is a bigger perspective than just what's in front of you, right? To be a spider. Would you be a spider in your next life? I loved the feeling of that because this book had the concepts of loyalty, friendship, and it was just really powerful in friendship and what you will do for your friends. But for the whole thing about Charlotte's Web is that they presumed that the words that Charlotte wrote on her web for Wilbur was a god, mystical, magical thing that was happening, but it was very tactile and very smart from Charlotte and Wilbur's part. Because Wilbur was afraid that they were just going to cut him up and make him into bacon. They're going to fatten him up, and then when winter comes, they're going to eat him. So Charlotte didn't want that to happen because she loved Wilbur. Wilbur was her friend. So she had the idea to inspired ideas outside of yourself to create messages on her web to save Wilbur. She's smart because she knew that how do you get to humans when you're an animal and you can't speak? You write it out, and the human not being so, if you're born into a certain religion and you're taught a certain religion and your family's parents were and they were, you never far from it. You never learn to question it. So I wonder if they knew that the community around them wasn't open to thinking for themselves. So they took the writings that Charlotte wrote for Wilbur as God speaking to save the pig, which is pretty funny because this book had to deal with themes of fame, and you don't want to save people unless they're famous or or they bring interest to you, which is really funny and really weird. And a lot for a kid to swallow because it was like they didn't want Wilbur until he was famous. I just want to sit with that thought for a while because you can apply that to humans and people and our pop stars today. We only want them when they're famous, when we make them famous. I love this book because it dealt with themes of death. This book actually made me cry because it had to deal with the leaving of friendship, and it puts into perspective the idea that you meet certain people to help you in your life, and some people end up being your favorite people, but it puts breakups into perspective because it shows that we're not here alone and there's always help on the outside. Tell me what you've learned from Wilbur's life. But those were some themes that I picked up from reading the book. What themes do you think you are going to pick up? Bye-bye from me and Charlotte.